For writers, I have one story about this. Writers are basically just, you are sort of on the outside looking in, and yet if you can't stay on the out always because you don't have nothing to write about. Like, you can get locked up in the university environment, and then you have no emotional or compassionate relation to people. Like being working at night in a factory or something. It's just. Right. Or whatever, being not for no reason. Many writers consider, you have been in prison, you're not a writer. Extreme cases. I'd rather not. But so I think, and from the point of view of spiritual growth, that you have to experience everything, and yet you sort of like are a bit of an outsider because you always look from the outside in, and that's what the great Irish short writer Trevor, what is his name?
Because you're sitting on the chairs, so I guess that means that I have to sound sophisticated or something. But I'm not sophisticated, so I'll just tell you the fun facts that I learned about Boris. Okay, he has 8 books of short fiction. He writes radio scripts for Croatian National Radio. He has a novel coming out that is pronounced Kapor.
Kapor is like a last name, yes. Very good.
And it's...
Coin means horse. Kapor and horse.
Okay.
It's an experimental novel, yeah.
And then checking around for some things that he's translated, because he's a tutor in 2 different languages, and so I figured, he translates things right. Turns out he's worked on Tanka poetry of Makoto Ueda, Dakota by Kathleen Norris, and Nexus by Henry Miller, for a few. So kind of a huge range.
And this Miller too.
Right on.
And he was actually appeared in Croatian translation too. It was like a good. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's cool. Yeah. Oh well, I was just going to also point out that you were in the National Writing Program. Not like anybody cares.
Yes. Yeah, if people just know. Everybody knows the workshop, but.
And that you won the Goran Prize.
Yes, that's I won when I was very young. I won this. This is like a major national prize when I was like maybe 20 something. But many years ago, I got 53, so
still
spring chicken.
Impressive to win a national.
Well, yeah, I was. This was just before the troubles in the Balkans, and then I was. But do you want to finish your introduction then, maybe?
Then I was also going to point out that not only does he write short fiction in this novel that's coming out, he also does visual art and micro poetry of his own.
Right.
So and I am going to vote for you. Reading in Croatian.
Right, I will read just for people maybe. So, but just briefly before I introduce what I'm actually doing. So how did I end up in Iowa City? And I was a published Croatian author, before I got here, and then as a conscientious objector, basically, I left before the war in Croatia, and then I was a guest here in the International Writing Program in '91, and then I met my partner and best friend Denise, and then we got married, and that's how I stayed in Iowa City for many years. And then on and off, I lived here since like '91. But the past few years, I was most of the time spent in Croatia, and I also lived in Spain a little bit, and kind of a little bit of a gypsy soul, I'd say. And I know Chuck also. We know each other since about like '94, '95. We have a common poet friend, really good poet. And ever since, Chuck is sort of a pit bull. He just is after you, and he just, if you like get away, he's gonna make sure that there's an email what's going on. And anyhow, and then what I do right now, I'm a fully bilingual writer, and all of my books so far were published in Croatian, but I had some publication online, flash fiction or love stories in English. I published some in Ireland and places like that. And what I do, my real passion is sort of like what I call micropoems, which are hugely inspired by sort of like the East. The East is my thing. And I call them micropoems because I'm afraid of a phrase like haiku. It's just so loaded with all this. Anyhow, so I'm going to start with this reading. This is the start with a few of these micropoems, and then we maybe go into some of the flash fictions that I thought they kind of. And then I'm gonna give it maybe a little, in another language how it sounds. So anyway, so here we go. Lorca, with your beautiful glowing eyes, debonair, yet innocent of guile, how you managed to stay sentimental despite the moonlight and the horsemen and the guitar strumming under the stars, and how far you went in understanding the hollow electricity of our age, still firmly the Stone Age, despite the fireworks, the spacecrafts, even this basketball game between Myanmar and Vietnam on YouTube. Lorca, lovely, like a dewdrop on one's skin. Okay, this one comes a little closer to the skin and would probably maybe be controversial with where I come from, but I think it's still full of empathy and passion. Anyways, this one is called the Croats. Some Croats wear cravats. Few don't. Most are loud. Few are quiet. Many, mostly aged, decrepit men, pedal around on creaky old bicycles. A crow is a national bird of Croatia. There are so many of them, and nobody ever shoos them off from the pitiful tiny mews where most Croats reside, in the remnants of the communist chicken coop architecture. Still, many Croats drive good, small, sporting cars, even though they drive too fast, and are always bent upon running you over on the pedestrian crossing. On the highway, the Croats drive with fury, almost afraid of their spanking new cars. Thus many die in horrific car accidents. Yes, Croats love their cars. If only they loved their cats as they do their heavily mortgaged cars. Croats, despite their gloomy exterior, are impish and mocking people, despite driving as if through the streets of Timbuktu. Invariably, the Croats hate the Serbs, the famous wayward genius Tesla being a favorite bone of contention between the two tribes. Both claim the great man, both disown him. Lucky for Tesla, he had spent his life penniless in a fusty NYC attic, or else they surely put him against the wall for some shitty reason or another. These cutthroat Croats, Strindberg wrote once, beware of their odd string ties and their guttural shenanigans. This is a quote from like 19th century. Okay, this one is this March. One colleague of mine, she's a really good Croatian poet. We were invited. We spent a month in Denmark. It was a really great experience, and then we had a couple of readings, and one was at a really good poetry festival in the city called Odense. And so this is the one from that, and we met this sort of very famous Danish poet. It's called In the Beat Business. We bow to him, congratulate on his performance. Jazzy, so cool. He's the queen of the fairies. No, wait, he's the king of the Danish beat. Yet damn icy and remote, an iceberg, prisoner of his own greatness, milking the cow of critical kindness. And of course the big university boss writing the check, another hefty one. Hey, look, you say, well, I have got one too, so I can beat on myself, beat it out and about with the best of the beats in this beatnik business. Okay, this one is called Message in a Bottle. To my love, I'll send this morning's sketch across the sea in a big green bottle. Let it float down the stream to the sunny cafe where she might be, sitting with her friend, sipping the Peruvian or Bolivian blend, organically roasted, fairly traded across the sea. Let's see. Try this one. Maybe I'll do a few of these real micro poems. Okay. Sitting in the Zendo, snowflakes grazing the window panes. That dog will not stop barking. September in the bus country, a train jolts then stops, few get off, one or two board this car, the clouds drifting across the sky. This one borrows the Japanese word saido, which in Japanese means another time, and it's basically about that sense that you get sometimes as to what could have been, what should have been, why couldn't have been different, and basically of the passing of things. So, not always so, neither now nor never, it shouldn't be, it had to be this now. Nothing else, yet a touch, a speck perhaps of tenderness, of nostalgia perhaps for what could have been. Good. History of a pair of walking shoes, profound these shoes with their scars, scratches, scuffs, bumps, rips, burns. Their history as good as any. Chestnut falls on your head, postmodern Newton, the last pilgrim arriving in the hostel, alas, already booked. This one is from, I lived in this little town near Barcelona, and below this flat there was a little butcher shop, and it was, so this is from that experience. In the butcher's window, a still life of sausages and cheeses, la nature morte, the medieval illumination, spoiled by the quick peek from the fat yowl butcher rearranging the salami. Okay, this one is sort of a little love story, I'd say. May you be born in May, and may all beings achieve liberation from the chains of samsara. May we walk together again upon the fields of clover, of Queen Anne's lace and hay, soft-footed, with the tchotchkes and trinkets of life well lived clacking in our backpacks. May the spring bunnies pop out everywhere, these nibblers on the morning dewed grass. Even a duckling is here, protected by her fierce daddy duck, fending off the imposters, minding the business of the creek, keeping an eye on the coon that just run under the co-op's building. And how do we start? Yes, Kitty. And then how do we start? At the jetty of the CD JFK airport, after the passengers emerged from the brown, battered corridors that could have belonged to Kinshasa International, amid a million anonymous and lonely faces in a scene worthy of the momentous Chris Marker in the upper level gallery, an illumined, iconic Storm waved at him. Storm is the last name, spelled with an E, S-T-O-R-M-E. Storm was a creature of the stars and the sea, perhaps, cold, some would have said unforgettable, but completely herself, pleaded the others, fewer in numbers, those that believed in her blindly, like the religious zealots. And he was of the moon and of the midnight hours, prone to daydreams and losing track of what he wanted to write about. Oh yes, her blue eyes and night-black hair, how he cried and cried, the bitter tears of Petrov and Kant, and a roller coaster ride of cruel days of loneliness, of intense craving. The desire of the endless speculation, but now there she was, Storm, the mystery, waving and smiling from the other side of yet another security checkpoint. Storm, he uttered, holding his breath, as if her name was a magic formula. She yawned. What brings you here, she said. The JFK crowd turned into ears. His heart froze. She exploded in laughter. You bloody idiot. I'm joking, she cried. Silly thing, he mumbled, as the snow dust fell outside of the JFK, sweet like the powdered sugar, wet like their saliva making kisses, until the stars vanished from the sky. And this does my, I guess, 25 minutes, so David, hello. Somebody wants some questions?
Weren't you going to read one in Croatian?
Yes, let's try. Let's just for the people who get a sense how it sounds. Weirdly, yeah. Okay. I have this. I always work on several projects, and this was a pretty intense winter for me because I was kind of out and about, and I live in this coastal city for a couple of weeks in Croatia. It's probably the most beautiful city in the part of the world. It's called Split. And it was February, and it was miserably cold, and I just had this little sleeping bag that is basically for the temperatures 50 Fahrenheit and up. So it was quite an experience with mice going crazy at night and shrieking. But that was the only place I could stay, and then I started this project, a little book of essays, it's a weird little title, but the working title is the art of pooping, and I know it's scatological. It's so, but it makes you think of even last summer I was in the Camino in Spain, and then all these experiences that you were like you're realizing how filthy actually us humans can be, and how people are so not focused as what they are doing. Anyway, so then that's how I started this just as a working title. Of course, it's not all the essays on that topic, but it sounds unsavory. But I'm just gonna see if I can maybe read a little fragment in Croatian and then be. And in Croatian, the title would be Umjetnost kakanja, and kakanja is like a childish lingo. Like kakati would be like it's not like like pooping. Yeah, anyhow. So this one was about fellow travelers on the Camino, and they create mess in the woods, and then you're like, oh my God, people are just terrible. And then you look at the animals, and animals are wonderful because they're so clean, like these guys. So anyway, so this is but just for the rhythm. Ogled means an essay in Croatian. So kakati u šumi zapravo je umjetnost u malom. Šokantno je zapravo prvo kad čovjek prolazi stazama tisuća hodočasnika na Camino de Santiago, koliko je malo broj onih koji znaju dobro općiti s prirodom. Šokantno je zapravo koliko je mali broj onih koji za sebe znaju počistiti. Zato ovaj naizgled pomalo šokantni ogled upravo će pokušati stati na stranu prirodi i možda poneko od modernih divljaka naučiti kako treba po uzoru na zvijeri to obavljati na čisti i uredan način. Yes.
You forgot to say that you have published a book in Bulgarian.
And I forgot it. I forgot.
I've always wanted to go to Bulgaria, and here Boris has a book published in Bulgarian and translated by a real translator from Croatian into Bulgarian. An 80-page book of short stories. In Bulgaria.
With my illustrations, because that's my real passion, is actually also drawing and sketching. And here's my friend David, who is a painter, who's a big supporter in that area as well. But it's the first one that my friends in Croatia is like, I have a couple of really good friends. They're like, okay, you should put I call them doodles, days in discussions. So it turned out really pretty well, and as the reference, Bulgarian is a different language. It's in a different script. They use like so-called Cyrillic script. The Croatian language uses Latin letters, just like English. It's in Latin. It's not like Korean or something. And it's a very musical language. And I was in Bulgaria, and I think like 2012. I had one reading. I was there for 5 days, and they were I think they're my favorite Slavic people. They're just wonderful people, and that's how it came to this contact. And then later I connected with another woman from Croatia whose book has been translated now as well. And it's been, who knows, maybe we hook you up somewhere.
Oh yeah, Boris was trying to get us both a job in Bulgaria, but it
like
didn't pan out.
Yeah, teaching English, but it's like teaching English is kind of difficult because it's a huge, anywhere in the world there's so many native speakers right now. There's so many North Americans in South America, for example, and
Can your book be found online?
Yes, I have some. I have really one in Croatian. I have this book of short stories that is like fully available, but it's, as I said, I have some individually, some little flash fictions and some stories in English, but I hope maybe somehow get to that point where. But it's going to be probably like flash fiction before any longer form. And it's funny because for me it works better, like minimal works better in English somehow. And anyhow, Chuck, I'm running almost a little bit over, but...
you mentioned in your Croatian Camino to Santiago.
Yeah, last year's.
Did you go on it?
Yes, I did.
Oh my!
It was a great experience. It's just kind of turning point. I think Camino is really good. But basically, I'm on the road since last July. I think I haven't been in one fixed place. But then I decided I want to go back to Iowa City because of.
So you see, if he's translated Nexus by Henry Miller
Yeah, I translated the book. This was like in 2007.
into Croatian,
Yes,
right?
in the Croatian.
Then one day he'll have to translate Sexus and Plexus.
Ah, yeah.
And
No,
then-
I'm not. No, I think I'm done with Henry Miller, really. But, you know, people, Henry Miller is weird because, you know, and you and I talk about this, it's always unfortunately associated with, for the wrong reasons. And he's never associated for the reasons of, you know, having some really great literary moments, and especially in his essays. And people always get sidelined by this deliberate shocking value, you know, sometimes. But it's not. But Nexus is a really good novel because it's a novel about, you know, America of the like 30s and fighting like mad to live and survive, and being nobody out of nowhere. And you know, he's admirable because he's like, you know, he's an outsider. He didn't come from the inside of the academic environment to become a writer, and just out of nowhere basically. And that's one of the reasons why I read almost all of his works. But now that novel is good. You know, the question is what's, you know, how it's will it stay? Is it still? I don't think I have much more interest in him somehow. And but yeah, it was fun to translate this because like in Croatian they had one Nexus was translated like early in the 40s, or no, in the 50s. When was it? About late 50s, because that's when it was published originally, I think in 59. And then languages become just like English. They turn into obsolescence. You know, they become obsolete. So you have to update it. And
I know I don't have to give Chuck an introduction because everybody here knows who he is, but since I found out interesting things about Boris to share, I'm now going to share the interesting things that I've heard about Chuck, and he can tell me whether they're true or not. I've heard that you have done fruit picking and tree planting.
What?
I heard that you've done fruit picking and tree planting as jobs.
Yeah.
That you've taught English or literature on 4 different continents.
A bunch of different countries. I never counted up the continents.
That you have 12 books of poetry. I know of 11.
Yeah, well, one of them only have one poem in them.
Okay, maybe that's the one I'm missing. And the other thing that I know about Chuck is that I had been in Iowa City for all of 3 months when I went to a reading of what was the North Side Book Market. And there was this guy giving a reading, and so I kind of stood in the back and listened, and he just about knocked me flat. It was the first time I'd ever heard a poet say something that was so true that it hurt. He delivered a line about the planned obsolescence of a social class of people. And it changed how I read poetry. It changed who I read. And now he's got me reading this amazing author. So I'll have to return William Trevor to you in exchange for the favor of my heart.
All right. So I managed to revise this poem today, and I still don't have it quite right. But so how to read it, I don't know. But I'll read you a couple of the footnotes and then explain a little bit to it. Okay, 1, in American prisons, communication between prisoners locked in different cell blocks was done by shouting into the bowl of the toilet and hoping whoever might be close by in the other cell block would call your fall partners to the phone. So you bent down, here was the toilet bowl, you shouted, and then on the next cell block, if someone was close enough, they could hear this cistern-like voice coming from the other cell block, see? And they said, hey, get Jones, somebody wants to talk to him, see? And let's say you had an alibi you wanted everybody to stick to, see? But before you were interrogated by the police or charged, then you could talk with your fall partners and establish what you were all going to say. See, among other things you could talk about. Okay, footnote number 2. Eugene Debs, 1855 to 1926, was head of the IWW. Quote, while there is a lower class, I am in it. a criminal element, I am of it, and while there is a soul in prison, then I am not free. So I had heard about Debs for years, but never really read anything of his, and all of a sudden I found this quote somewhere, and I thought, that's all the guy has to say right there, plus being the head of the IWW, you know. Okay, so I attached these footnotes to the first 2 lines of the poem, and what it was, I was in my flat or something, typing away, bang, 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 you know, like some goofy writer, and the toilets seemed to be running. You know how toilets won't shut off? So you go over and you listen down into the toilet, and then you jiggle the handle. No, it still doesn't stop running. You have to take off the lid, get your hands down there, and fuck with it, else it won't ever stop running, see? So I was doing that, and then I started to think about those people talking through the toilet telephone, see? And my time in prison, and seeing them talk through the toilet, see? And how I had never seen that mentioned in any book or by anybody who wasn't a criminal, see? And I thought they forgot to talk about that, you know, people talking through the toilet. So then I wrote this poem. Listening into the depths. Like the particular toilet you had to listen down into. And who would be speaking to you now? Standing next to it, listening for the overtones. Had the valve stuck again, and you had to jiggle the handle or open the top and get your hands into the mechanism to free it up? Or would there be that subtle shift of tone which indicated the jet of water shooting out, now under a growing depth of water, which meant that it would finally turn off? Because if you walked away without ascertaining which of the 2 possibilities, it might run for hours or days and run up your water bill and irritate you as well with its running, passing, running, while you were into the writing of some of your none too miraculous poems and stories in the next room. This contacting through the subterranean passages, the hard cores would actually talk that way. You have never heard of such a thing mentioned even once in print or formal society, a symbol of American life and its oppressive class system. So I think it needs a little straightening out still, but how I'm going to do it, I don't know. But I got this good writing group, and these people are fantastic, and they'll say, oh, move this here, that there, change this, and by the time they've hammered it out, I'll know how to straighten it out, whatever straightening it needs. I'll read an old one here. I must have written this one 35 years ago. Remember when the old free clinic used to be in the basement of the Methodist church here? It was there for years. And I'd go there for all kinds of things, you know, and meet the people there and so forth and so on. Free clinic. The basement of a church, one fan slowly circling from the ceiling as in an old-time drugstore, a shabby clientele of exposed flesh swelters on this July night. Yet we rest easy with each other, some maybe knocked up or with the clap, a urinary vaginal clog-up, or needing birth control, a constant parade of people to the John, with their paper cups to get the clean catch in its free fall. A kid acts up, his ma dupes neither him nor us with her candied, "Come here, I have something to tell you." When she grabs a hold of him, she tells him, all right, in a staccato of threatening whispers. Does your stream split? Do you dribble a little more? When was the last time you were treated for venereal disease? Old John asks, then practices his blood pressures on me. I tell him then, I'm just now trying to get it down to this sphygmomanometer. I sit without a shirt, it fell in a puddle in the examining room, and meet some young guy, lank and intense. He tells me he takes medication for his anger. You can tell he's a little proud of it, this anger. I get very military when I get mad. This crack shot talks of M30s, shooting the tops of bottles off at 100 yards, maybe going after Reagan, and how a girl got angry at him once. He felt sorry for her, knowing that she might provoke him to some dangerous point. And what he might do, this last bit he recalls with juicy would have been anticipation. He's latched on to some little hillbilly girl from South Carolina, bright as agate her eyes. You could spot her instantaneous in a lineup of these bigger northern women. A little crooked somehow she is. Ass bulges out, slightly bowed in the legs, and talks along with her man a kind of vaguely threatening, sweet hillbilly insistence. She's curious about me, looks me straight in the eye, as none of the others would. Something subhuman, they might judge her, yet she stands out, a more intense animal presence, some part of an old soul or body they haven't knocked out of her yet. She could only get $1 something an hour in 1981 in South Carolina after she graduated from high school. So she came north, where now she can vie for minimum wage. I overhear her tell her patient advocate that she's missed her last period. She'll begin her brood of young groundhogs, chippy monks, fighting hillbillies. Maybe they won't take pills for their anger, but point it straight and make it stick. The medical student says cough with his finger up my scrotum, feels up my ass with his glove probe. He and John go over every possible angle of my trouble. In the end, I'm waiting again without my shirt, remembering through the yellowing wallpaper years, most that I know end up here on the edge of their rickety wood slat chairs, waiting for children, prenatal care, fatherhood, abortion referral, prognosis, pills, some cure or cure-all, grand central of the disenfranchised and malnourished. It strikes me then in a strange lapsed conclusion that these others here are actually trying to give us aid, some kindness bestowed, care apportioned, patients' rights tacked up on the wall. No hotshot medics here. The student pharmacist gives me my free prescription, and I go out into the sultry night, thinking of the vague anxiety in the women's faces, and imagine all the people lying up in their rooms, sweating, trying to fuck, oozing, drinking too much, getting high, listening to their children cry, wondering where their next whatever is coming from. Oh, sort of good memories come back from that old free clinic.
Yeah.
A lot of you people probably went there too.
Maybe I always wanted to read one of your poems. Let's No. But
Go ahead. I'll be looking.
one
while
of the
you-
one of the ones I loved. Can I?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Permission?
Go ahead.
Okay, this is when he was up and about in Leeds, northern England. The atmosphere of I translated this one in Croatian. The atmosphere of this is just beautiful because it's just like northern England with that light, and it's just there's something about it, and it's something about so 70s about this that I really like, and that is kind of period that I was in my teens, but the 70s were pretty interesting. I think. Anyhow, so Leeds. The last sunset I remember was along a tow path in Leeds, walking in the dry yellow grass. We smoke a joint, Tony and I, pass it back and forth along the green stream with its old wooden locks. It flows into a waterfall, falling down over brown stones, and across on the other bank a factory lights up, and Leeds is a pale nest of fireflies. We stand in the gloom of late November chill, feeling on our fingertips the last coals heat of the roach. For an instant our lips glow orange. A train hurtles over the trestle above us, across the blue bubbling river, traveling the passengers to their ends. Remember Spender and his train? We look out into the smoking twilight and seem to see strange dwarfs drift up from doors and chimneys with huge heads and flushed red faces, each with a glass of bitter in his hard, husked hand. In the distance, the train sounds of faint rails echo, then darkness lands its first silken parachutist at our feet, and the red brick of 1,000 flaming houses slowly burns to suit. Yeah, that's pretty good, my friend.
Nice.
That's how it was, my guy.
Good job.
Positive.
Okay, I'll read this one and finish off with this one. This one is for Bukowski, and you all know Bukowski, but for me, see, I've never met the guy. When Morty had my old manuscript for Howl in the Morning, he said Bukowski owed him a favor, so he'd send the manuscript to Bukowski to see if he'd give us a blurb
Really?
for that book.
That's pretty big.
Bukowski didn't like it. He said it doesn't do anything for me. But I had been reading Bukowski ever since the late 50s and pretty much read every book of his. Even after he died, I read a couple more posthumous books. But I figured, well, it's a disappointment that he didn't like my work, but you just got to accept those things. And besides that, he was an urban poet, and in a way, I was really a kind of rural poet coming from the Midwest, see, and had actually worked in rural jobs, see. So I thought, well, maybe it's natural. And besides that, I got a blurb from Mare de la Sur, so I thought, now you know
That's
which side they're on, see. Anyhow, Bukowski used to have this thing about poetry readings, how horrible they were, and everyone just seemed full of shit from the get-go, and he would downplay them, on and on and on. So he even wrote some big long poems, sort of ranting and raving how bad poetry readings were. Well, in a way he was right. So I've got another poem in here, which I won't read, called Poetry Readings, about when I went to Vermont, where I used to live, and participated in a poetry reading there. What do they call it? An open reading. See. So in a way, that turned out to be sort of corrupt and weird, and you'd see all these people who had gone to prep school together, the rich assholes, and they'd be jabbering and slithering around each other like snakes. But a few of them could halfway write, But then what they did, which was really horrible in a way, all the hotshots would read in the first part of the reading, and then the people who were left had to read in the second part of the reading. And so then the hotshots would stand up and excuse themselves.
Right.
Oh, I have to get some milk for my children before the stores close. Well, maybe they did. Maybe that was true. I don't know. But a large number of them left before the reading was over. See, so people had listened to their poems, but they didn't really want to stay or care about the poems written by the lesser people at the end of the line. See, so you saw that, and it was so transparent. You thought, what?
But it's still happening. There was this festival in Denmark. It was like that.
Same thing.
Like the stars of the night. They've done their business and they're like,
Yeah.
Okay, I don't care about anybody else.
Right. It's horrible.
It's rude. It's rude.
And
It's rude.
if you're gonna
It's rude.
read it to some people, then you've got to be there and listen to what they're gonna say,
Right.
or else it's no damn good. So
Now you won't be able to.
I won't be able to find it.
You'll have to read something else.
All right. I'll read a different thing then, since I can't find that one. Now I've read old Camus for a long time, see, and like a year or so ago, I read The Stranger again for about the 9th time, and Jesus Christ, it sort of broke open right there. When you read a book 9 times, it jumps out at you sometimes in a strange way. Anyhow, I found this quote from Camus, and I don't remember it from many of his books, but it must have been there somewhere. So the title is this quote from Camus: "Any fate can be overcome through scorn." Well, all right. In a way, he's got something, Whatever happens to you, scorn it, if you don't like it. Trouble is, one of us said, it's hard to work up that much scorn. I mean, he is talking about a tremendous amount. But of course, you felt enough of it already to give you a head start, so maybe you could summon up enough to count. Yeah, it would probably eat away at a person who was feeling it like some kind of intense inner acid. Something like bitterness, which, as you know, eats you alive. But there is some difference between bitterness and scorn. What would you say? Scorn is more focused, more like a kind of laser light. But now, scorn involves both anger and disgust. But isn't there a certain kind of hatred that comes before even the anger? The worst kind. So there is a better kind, then, that comes out of anger and is more justified, has something of a real reason to exist. If you hadn't felt that much bitterness, you wouldn't really understand what most people in this world have to feel. You'd be less than the one-eyed king in the country of the blind. The fact that so many people feel cheated, robbed, excluded, betrayed, rejected, shat upon. You would have missed out on one of the major human experiences. That's true. But have you ever met some really poor person, and more or less very unfortunate as well, other maladies, losses, tragedies, and they don't feel much bitterness at all? And yet they seem lucid, perceptive, clear somehow. I know what you mean, as though the bitter person had presumed something about life, some sense of justice that hadn't been borne out, and yet this other person presumed nothing at all and was the better off for it. But for you, of course, your bitterness informs your whole life. And mightn't it just as well? Maybe at the end of your life, you'd feel your fate right there with you. Would you feel that overcoming all the absurdities and the rottenness through scorning? Or would you rather be appreciating whatever good had been there with some kind of final feeling of acceptance? My guess is that maybe it would only come to you close to the end which way it would fall, the choice aspect suddenly gone out of it, and it would be one or the other. The feeling would make itself known, and perhaps that's what you'd go out on. Could there be some combination of the two? Maybe, but somehow it seems dubious. Perhaps fate is so absurd that you might just as well scorn it all and be done with it once and for all. But how would that be done?
Okay. Where's Neil?
So,
Is there anything else?
can we think of anything to say?
Well done.